Greetings, everyone. Today, here on Senate Soapbox, I am joined by Susan Zimet, who is the Executive Director of the Hunger Action Network, and she's been in that capacity since 2015. She's a former public official with deep connections in Albany and across the state. Welcome to the program.
Thank you very much for having me on. It's an honor.
Thank you for being here. You know, Susan is also the founder and president of 2020 Project Woman, which is a nonprofit organization dedicated to educating, celebrating, and promoting the 100th anniversary of the 19th Amendment.
Yep.
That's quite a task.
Yes, it is.
She's also authored a book for young adults, or authored several books for young adults, right? Or are you authoring one now?
No, it's this one.
Oh, look at that. Let's show that there.
It's that one.
Roses and Radicals. That's a great book. Susan is, the program today is going to focus on hunger issues,
Right.
but as you can see, she's a very accomplished public servant, I guess.
Yeah.
I know that recently she was on a press conference with us regarding Uber, and she helped us bring Uber and Lyft to their knees. They now removed
Yes.
the whole issue
You
about...
did an amazing job. You
No,
know, you brought it forward, and a couple of days later, there was action.
That's right.
That's pretty impressive. And you haven't even, have you introduced the legislation?
No, we introduced it, but
But
the
it's
day
not-
after we introduced, both Uber and Lyft decided to remove arbitration clauses,
right.
which subjected individuals, especially women, they were subjected to
Right.
sexual harassment by Uber drivers. They had to resort to these arbitration clauses, which
Right.
were very, very pro-Uber and Lyft. And I'm happy to say that Uber and Lyft have decided to remove
Yeah,
or to
that was
make that a requirement.
fantastic. That was
But I want to
fantastic.
thank you for advocating and helping us with that.
Okay, and thank you for bringing it forward and including me.
But we have more work to do on
Yes, we
arbitration
do,
clauses.
especially, yes, we have a lot of work to do on women's sexuality, hunger, lots of issues.
Well, today
Which is why
we're-
I'm so glad you're a senator.
Well,
congratulations.
Thank you so much. You know, we got it. I got a great staff who
I know that.
they're experienced and helped me get started quickly. So
Yes.
we're going to continue to do good things and advocating for the people of the state of New York.
Terrific.
So, but today here we're here today to talk about
Right,
hunger.
right.
I know that many people don't know throughout New York State the issue of hunger that we have. There's some counties in the state where you have 40, 50, even 60% hunger or poverty rates, especially amongst communities of color, especially amongst the immigrant community.
That's right.
And many people, especially people in New York State, that don't see poverty up front and close, don't realize that this is a major problem that we have in the state of New York. And so it's through programs like yours, the Hunger Action Network, that we're trying to fight to eradicate hunger
Right.
throughout this state. So let me ask you first question, Susan. Poverty is on the rise today, and we live in a world so out of balance that we have the twin epidemic of poverty and obesity, and it impacts every community. What is the correlation between poverty and hunger?
Well, first, you were doing statistics at the beginning about how much poverty there is and how people don't see it. And especially with hunger, it's really in so many ways hidden because people are sort of very embarrassed to speak about the fact that they don't really have enough food. And in so many communities upstate, you know, and probably like in the Bronx and other areas, you know, you have kids that are in school that are 70, 80, 90% of the kids are on free or reduced meals. I mean, that's really pretty scary that that's the only place a lot of these kids get food. So what I learned when I came into the hunger space was that people first pay for the roof over their head. Then they pay for heat, if they, you know, to make sure that they stay warm during the winter. If they're fortunate enough to have health care, they pay for health care. Usually they have no money left for food, and that's why they're forced into pantries. And now let's remember, too, when pantries started and the emergency feeding program started, they were, quote, emergency feeding programs. They were supposed to be there only when, you know, you were going through a bad time and you needed them. Now they're sort of the supermarket for a lot of the poor, and it's a much bigger problem than people realize. And I can say again for myself, I was in local government for a long time. It wasn't until I got up to Albany and started working in the hunger field that I found out that we almost live like in a third world country. It's pretty scary.
Sure, and people don't realize the collateral damage of
Oh,
hunger.
my God.
I mean, you have children that are going to school that are hungry,
That's right.
that don't have the proper nutrition. So how do we expect them to excel and do well?
Well, that's right. I mean, later on, you actually were asking me that question, but we might just jump ahead real quick from the perspective that you're exactly right. How do we expect a kid to go to school hungry, pay attention, and learn? They can't. You know, if you're hungry and I'm hungry, we go to the refrigerator, we take something out. We'll go to, you know, the little cafe and get something to eat, and you quell that hunger. Imagine not being able to quell that hunger. How does a kid pay attention in school? And so in a lot of ways, it's so backwards because we send kids to school hungry, they act out, they get into trouble, they eventually drop out, they get into trouble, they go to jail. So we spend all of this money on the back end instead of spending money on the front end. And back to diabetes and obesity and the question as it was set up, that what happens is so many people are eating such poor food that we're actually creating an epidemic with obesity. So instead of giving people good food at the beginning and letting them be healthy, instead we're giving them poor food or no food, and then we're spending all of this money on dealing with obesity through Medicaid and Medicare on the back end. It's just a crazy, crazy, crazy way we do things.
Well, I understand. I've recently became a vegan myself. I've lost 30 pounds.
Congratulations! Wow.
Thank you. But I did a lot of research on the impact of food, and it's amazing that when you eat properly, the life-changing experience that you have.
That's right.
The advantage that you put children on a path to succeed. Right. Simple things that people do not realize.
Right.
And it's a shame because, I see a lot of parents taking kids to places like McDonald's and places like, these fast food places that really aren't that expensive. With the money that they spend they can do much better buying healthier foods.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's really scary. And with child hunger, and what people don't realize, and I know we're getting off some of the questions, but with child hunger, it's just, I don't even know what I was going to say because it gets me so upset. I can't believe it, But it's just, again, like you say, how do we expect anybody to succeed if they're not fed correctly?
That's correct. Now, the term food insecurity has now become a part of the popular nomenclature.
Right.
Tell us about food insecurity and how does your network
deal with it?
That's correct.
Well, okay, first and foremost, when I first got into the field and I learned about food insecurity, I, at a certain point, said, you know what? It's hungry. People are hungry. They're not food insecure, but it was a technical term created by government, I think, in a way to basically whitewash hunger. Because when you say we have X amount of hunger in America, that's pretty scary. When you say, well, we have so much food insecurity in America, people are like, what does that mean? So technically, food insecurity is defined by the USDA as lack of access at times to enough food for an active, healthy life for all household members and limited or uncertain availability of nutritionally adequate food. And food insecurity is not the same for everybody. So I could be from a food insecure home where it means that sort of when my SNAP benefits, my food stamp benefits run out, there is no food at all for the family short of going to a food pantry or a soup kitchen. There could be other people who are food insecure who they might have breakfast and lunch, but they don't have enough money for dinner or whatever. So there's different levels, and that's how they measure it. Are you low-level food insecurity or you're high-level food insecurity? But now I remember what I wanted to say before about the kids, that you actually have kids nowadays that are actually flunking school so they can go to summer school so they can be fed.
Really?
Because they know they get fed at school. The summer comes, what are they going to do to eat? And they actually flunk school so they can go to summer school to eat.
That's an amazing, it's just an amazing concept when you consider that we're
incredible?
One of the wealthiest, if not the wealthiest nation in the world.
And I would suspect that there's also a lot of people, and I think there's facts to back it up, that also even in, people who are incarcerated and stuff, at a certain point, it's like you can live on the street or you can be in jail and have a roof over your head and food and health care. These are the choices we're giving people, live in poverty or, maybe if we did the right things from the very beginning, like make sure people had food, had health care, had a house over their head, had a good education, that there were living wage jobs out there, maybe we wouldn't be spending all this money on the back end on Medicare, on Medicaid, on jails, on mental health, and all, opioids, whatever kind of stuff. Maybe we have to change our priorities as a government.
Well, there's no maybe about it. We certainly have to. And when you look at the policies that are coming from the federal government, we have a government now that seems to want to blame poor people for part of the ills in this country, seems to want to imply that poor people are poor because they want to, they're lazy.
Right.
They don't realize that many of these individuals that are in need of this assistance are children.
Right.
And
children, veterans, seniors, active duty military.
Mentally disabled people.
Yes.
So, these are people that need the help, and essentially we're blaming them for being in the position that they're in.
Right.
But what are some of the challenges that your network faces in order to get results?
Well, there's two different things that, two different ways to answer this question from the perspective of my network specifically, which we can get into afterwards. But first we'll talk about the hunger field as a whole.
Sure.
Because we're an advocacy organization, so we have special problems, but, let me get into the bigger picture. And we're talking about the federal government, whatever. Right now, what we are working on the hardest right now is basically fighting the federal government's rollback in the Farm Bill of the food stamp program, which is now called SNAP. And the audacity of these people, the duplicitous nature of these people, of what they're doing, they just passed a massive tax break for the richest of the rich. And we have statistics that show for like one rich person getting X amount of money in tax breaks, you could feed like say 32, 35 people, in comparison, okay? So we're gonna give somebody who can buy the best steaks, can buy the best yacht, probably lives in the best house, has the best health care. We're gonna give them more money, but we're going to take food away from 35, 40 people for that one person. I mean, it's horrible. So what they're doing in Congress right now is trying to roll back the benefits for people on food stamps, and they're going to be voting in the next day or two. So that's where, the big fight is right now. But yesterday, I was here in Albany spending a lot of time lobbying on the one fair wage, which has to do with tip workers who basically work in car washes, work in restaurants, work in nail salons, and they make a sub-minimum wage. They're not getting paid the full minimum wage, and they depend on tips. And in a lot of those fields, especially in the restaurant business, women are sexually abused, they have to put up with a lot and stuff. So we were lobbying with a lot of people from the industry. And what all these people were saying, and most of them, a lot of them were immigrants, but they live here legally, and they're working legally, and they're paying taxes, and they're doing, more than maybe our president's doing, but they're doing what they have to do.
And by the way, let me just interrupt you. What people don't realize is that these farm workers, for example,
Right.
are the reason why our produce are relatively cheap.
No kidding.
Now, when they can no longer work on the farms and they have to go somewhere,
Right.
and we start paying $8 for a tomato, that's when you
right.
probably see some reaction from some of these people at the federal government who want to blame them for
Oh,
the
that's
plight
exactly
that they're
right,
in.
exactly right. So what is happening is, so yesterday, here I was with all of these, workers. They're working. They work 12 hours a day, okay? But yet, because they're getting a sub-minimum wage, they depend on tips. Well, one of them pointed out that it's true. If you go to a car wash and you leave a $2 tip, if you even leave a $2, a $2 tip, but how many people are in the car wash working on your car, cleaning the windows, cleaning the wheels, vacuuming outside? A $2 tip for 10 people doesn't go very far. So most of the people who are...
For one person, it doesn't
Right,
go very
exactly.
far.
So the people on sub-minimum wage, they're working 12 hours a day. They're still relying on state and federal benefits to feed their families and meet the needs of their families. And then you have these people in Washington saying, oh, we want to give them the dignity of work, so we're going to take money away from food and we're going to put it into work programs to teach you how to work. These people know how to work. They're already working harder than any of these people in Washington. I'm sorry, but they can't make ends meet, but they make them the enemy. And really what it all comes down to is the wealthy just have a disdain for the poor. It's just the truth. They have a disdain for the poor, and for whatever reason, it's like, they're there because it's their fault. You tell me how a kid born in poverty, that's not fed well, that doesn't have a good roof over their head, doesn't get a good education, how do you expect that kid to succeed? Did that kid that was born into poverty choose to live in poverty? No. The child might just not have been given a chance. And anybody who actually does succeed that was born in poverty, almost to a T, you always hear them say, if it wasn't for the federal and state programs that helped lift me up out of poverty, I would never have been as successful as I am today.
Yeah, and it's even more baffling. I mean, when you have a president who was born with a silver spoon in his mouth, born to an extremely wealthy father,
That's right.
for him to look down with disdain on the poor, it's amazing, and hopefully we'll have a different president come 4 years.
I couldn't actually, during the elections, I know we're getting off questions, but during the elections, I just couldn't understand how somebody who's living in poverty could think that somebody who has gold toilet bowls really feels their pain. Yeah. I just could never understand the disconnect.
Well, not that I'm hoping that people start to feel it so that they can understand it, but
I know.
I think if certainly they start to understand it, that there'll be a trajectory change in what's happening policies.
Well,
in the federal government.
I had a really tough time with when the president did the thing with the tariffs and stuff, and it said the farm people are going to really be hurting. And there was this part of me that felt like, good, let the people who voted for the president feel the pain, okay? But then there was the part of me of like, but they don't deserve to feel the pain just because they made, a bad mistake.
That's correct. And the farm
so
workers,
it's like,
it'll trickle down to
the farm workers.
those
Exactly.
who need it the most.
Exactly. So just to get back to the question of how we fight it. So we work very, very hard with all the food pantries, the food banks. So we as Hunger Action Network, we represent the 3,000 emergency feeding programs in New York State, the soup kitchens, the food pantries. We work very closely with the food banks. And so we work to, get more money into the Hunger Prevention Nutrition Assistance Program, which is a state program that gives the money for the food banks and pantries to have the food for the people coming to their doors. We fight with them to stop the rollbacks, for SNAP on a federal level. Hunger Action also works, though, on all the issues to lift people out of poverty. So we'll work on wage theft, and we'll work on minimum wage, just like I was working yesterday on one fair wage. We'll work on universal health care. We'll work on like housing. So we'll do things to lift people out of poverty. For Hunger Action Network, though, our particular problem is we are more of an advocacy organization versus a direct food provider.
Right.
Now, people understand what Amnesty International does. They understand the Children's Defense Fund, that their advocacy fighting for issues of human rights or children's rights. In the hunger field, people like to give money directly to the food provider. They like to give money to the food pantry that's going to give you the can of food when you walk in.
Right, that's right.
Okay,
yeah.
So, but what they don't understand is the work that we do. Okay, we were the ones who were able to lead the charge to get the state to add 23% more money, which equated to about $8 million into the Hunger Prevention Nutrition Program, which meant all the pantries and food banks were getting like another $8 million to give food. We didn't get a penny of that money. We just did the work. Right. We were able to get the Assembly 3 years ago to put an extra $500,000 into the program also, which has been happening now every year for 3 years, and I don't think that money will ever go away, which again is going back to the pantries. But still, we didn't get the money. So it's just really hard for us to fundraise because people say, well, I want to just give it to the direct provider. And I sort of say, hey, you know what? The direct provider just got all this extra money because of the work we're doing.
Sure, but still, even the great work that you're doing and even the funding that you're getting, you said $500 million,
no, we don't
half
get
a million
it. We don't get it.
Well, that you advocate for and eventually goes into
and we're happy
into the
to do it. That's our work.
But even that is an abysmal number. It's an abysmal number. When you consider how many people do you think your advocacy impacts?
Oh, God, it impacts a hell of a lot of people. It impacts a lot of people. But the actual number of food insecure people or hungry people in New York is, I think it's over like 2 million people. It's like I have the actual number right here. I think it's 2.4 million people. I'll find it in a second. But in order to actually make sure that everybody in New York State actually gets 3 meals a day, which is the requirement in a sense, like HIPNAP is set up to basically make sure if you go to a food pantry that everybody in your family, so if you're 5 people, you should be getting 15 meals because you should be getting 3 meals a day for 3 days, for everybody in your family. We already through HIPNAP don't even provide, we through New York State already do not meet the needs of our own law, okay? We don't even meet the needs of our own law. Now, in order to make sure that people are basically not hungry in New York State, it would take about $1.3 billion, which quite frankly,
$1.3 billion.
Right, so nobody would go hungry in New York and would be getting their meals. And when you think about that, 1.3 billion, of course billion sounds like a lot of money, but not in the money. How much money do we give it to an economic development or to all these programs that don't work or to insane, programs again, if we fed people, we wouldn't have half the problems that we have that we're spending money on the back end.
Well, no, I believe, a lot of policies and legislation that I tend to support, I look at the fiscal impact, right? So when we talk, for example, off topic of it's raise the age.
Right.
If you implement it, raise the age, how much money are you going to save on the back end?
That's right.
So this $1.3 billion probably can save us $20 billion.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
Right. So these individuals that want to blame the poor are myopic.
That's right.
They refuse to look at the reality because these are the battles that I've had with them when I try to explain what they call liberal progressive policies. And
That's not liberal progressive. This is
actually, real people.
Tell me for a second. There is no religion that doesn't have something within their scriptures that talk about feeding the poor. Okay, it's a religious and moral obligation for us to be taking care of those in need.
But
it's
I
not
think
a liberal agenda.
You're absolutely right.
A liberal agenda to feed people.
But
okay?
those policymakers,
if that's what a liberal agenda is, I'm proud to be a liberal.
Listen, those policymakers, I think they skip those pages or chapters when they're reading whatever it's a Muslim or a Christian or they tend to avoid it, and they tend to forget that the face of poverty today are children.
That's right.
Children, in New York City, you still have counties where
we have.
Give me some statistics. For example, the Bronx.
Well, actually, I could give that to you, and actually, I don't have it with me right this second. And
you can estimate.
But no. But I was going to say what I did though is when we were advocating, for more money for the hunger prevention program, Feeding America has a map called Map the Meal Gap, and you just go on. It's an interactive map, and you can go onto every single county. So you could pull up New York State. Go into every county. So when I was lobbying for increases, before I would go into any assembly person or senate, I would download all of this information for their specific assembly district or Senate district, okay, and say, in your district alone, you've got 5 million people who are hungry. You've got 2 million people that are hungry. You've got 800,000 people who are hungry. And Assemblyman Andy Hevesy told me he carries that paper around in his briefcase.
By the way, he's done great work on
I know
trying to combat policy.
His housing stability. We're very supportive of him on that program
That's a very
because
good
again,
program.
we want to keep people in their homes before they get put onto the street.
Right. It's a cost-saving measure at the end
Again,
of the day.
is that
also.
a liberal agenda? I don't know. Don't you think it's better to keep people in their home? I mean, I've been in New York City a lot lately, and I have to say the increase in homelessness in New York City, everywhere you go, there are homeless people on the streets. And when we talk about the increasing face of poverty, okay, it's children. It's absolutely children. And most single mothers with children are in poverty. 70% are in poverty. It's really horrible. But also seniors are becoming a very, very big issue right now. I think we have here, I had the number, 63%. More than 5 million seniors currently face hunger in our country. After a lifetime of hard work, 63% of households with older adults, 50 plus, are facing an impossible choice to get medical care, or to buy groceries. And as the baby boomers come up in age, it's going to be a bigger and a bigger problem. So now seniors are facing hunger, and food is medicine. You have to take medicine with food half the time, and people are sick because they don't have food. So you have the rising face of hunger is seniors, children, college students, okay, because we're giving all of these grants to kids to get into college, but we're not paying for their needs and, their books, their housing, their food kind of stuff. Veterans is a big thing, but you know what a lot of people don't know? Active duty military people. We're sending people over to fight for our freedoms, and there's food pantries on every Marine base and every Navy base, and we have military families in the Army that are on food stamps.
That is astounding.
I mean, okay?
That is
so
astounding.
when I testified when they were doing hearings, and I went in Albany and testified in front of Congress, and I actually said, so let me ask you a question. We're sending our men and women over to fight, putting their life on the line while their families are back here on food stamps, going to pantries. So let me ask you a question. Are we just, quote, fighting for the 1%? Is that what this is all about? I mean, people just don't really understand. And again, I only got in the field 3 years ago. I had no clue. Okay, now that I'm in this field, it's just like I just can't even believe that I could live in a country that just has such a cold heart.
Well, I'd like to think that it's a segment of this country that has a cold heart.
Yes, because me and you don't.
Yeah.
No,
there's some really good people there that are out trying to do work, like
yes.
yourself and other advocates. But it just seems like some of these elected officials, especially again at the federal level,
That's right.
who have taken this position that, we have NIMBY with homeless programs.
Right.
You have this handout mentality that people think that by helping someone helping feed someone, which should be one of our godly duties, that you're giving handouts, and you're going to make them unproductive, and you're going to make lazy individuals. And how do you make a 6-7-year-old child lazy?
Right, exactly.
It's just it's incredible.
Yeah.
And I've heard stories in my district where seniors have to decide whether to buy their medicine
That's right.
or buy their food.
That's right.
Where you see children in public schools that are living in shelters and going to pantries to
That's
food.
right. That's right.
And, you put a ball and chain on these children's ankles before they can even get a start to be productive citizens. But a little time that we have left.
Sure.
Tell me, what can the average citizen do to help eradicate hunger, and what can we do as legislators, as policymakers, at the state level, at the federal level, to make things so much better for these people?
Okay. Well, first, which goes back to my book, Roses and Radicals, the epic story of how American women won the right to vote. So what this book is a book about, directed towards young adults, like middle school and high school kids, but any adult can read it and really learn the story. And they see what these women went through to get us the right to vote. Once you read this, you realize how much of a privilege it is to vote. So the first thing is to vote.
Yes.
You have to vote. Then you have to vote to put people in office like you who have a sensitivity and have an understanding of these issues and who are going to fight for these issues. So that's the second most important thing. When you guys get elected, you have to remember, unfortunately, because of money in politics and having the donors who give you money, we have to remember who we're really here to serve, and that we don't walk away from our core values, and we still fight for those we were elected to serve. And we pass legislation for those that are elected to serve. So we pass legislation like, Andy Hevesey's, like Home Stability Act, or we increase HIPNAP, and we, do universal health care, and we do things to help people be able to afford to buy food. So we have to vote, we have to elect people that care about the issues we care about, and then we have to make our voices heard, which means we have to make the phone calls, we have to come to Albany, we have to go to Washington, and if people think that their vote doesn't matter, they're wrong. And too many people say it doesn't matter, it doesn't matter. It absolutely matters. When people say that, well, they're not going to listen, the phone calls don't matter, that's not true at all. I know.
We listen.
We count, you say, okay, on this issue, we got, 3,000 calls against, we got 2,000 calls for, you pay attention to that. So people need to use their voice, and they need to work with the legislators that they care about. And then, for people like us, we know who our supporters are. We know the people like you and other legislators here that are going to care about our issue and carry it and work your hardest to get it done. And so we need to support you, you need to support us, and we need to work together for the people that really need us. Yeah. And at the end of the day, truth be told, government needs to be there for the people who need it.
Well, let me pose a challenge to you. I want us to create a hunger/poverty tour.
I would love to.
So that we can take these individuals, policymakers,
right,
even the common citizen that believes that giving food to poor is handouts.
Right.
Let's do a poverty tour.
I would love to do that.
We go to several areas throughout the state of New York. We take individuals, we as a delegation, and let's take them to see these children that are hungry,
absolutely,
in these poverty areas, and see if they can survive what these individuals go through every day.
Absolutely. There's a thing called the SNAP Challenge, and it's a national challenge that is done where it basically says to legislators, okay, this is how much money you get on SNAP. Okay, now let's see you eat for a week on this amount of money. Okay, so you now go to the supermarket, you now go buy food, and you prepare food for your family for the week on this. And it's called the SNAP Challenge, and we love for people to do that. So maybe we can challenge all the legislators in New York State to do it.
Yeah,
but I still would like to do the poverty thing, because I think you really do need to go and you need to look in the eyes of a child who's hungry. You need to talk to the eyes of a child. You need to go to a senior center, to a veteran center. You need to see what a lot of these food banks are doing, where they're doing all these innovative programs where they're literally getting on buses and going to veterans events, to bring food to them, because veterans are too proud to walk into a food shelter, and get, take food. Let's walk into a senior center and watch these, seniors on a congregate meal while President Trump talks about taking away Meals for Wheels. Let's go into a congregate site and see and talk to the people who are actually eating those meals and might be the only meal that they have, and maybe the only people that they get to talk to in their life, because they're living at home in a house, and by going to a congregate site, they get fed, they can have company. Let's show the face of poverty. The face of poverty is you and me and all sorts of other people. It's not just, these immigrants or these poor blacks or these, drug dealers or whatever that they like to paint the picture of. No, they're your next door neighbor.
Well, let's take a look, because there's nothing more powerful than seeing a hungry child. And, to individuals that are listening to this program, I tell you, next time you buy a cup of latte, see that cup can feed a child for an entire day.
That's right.
Go out there and go to the pantries and go to the churches that are providing food, and see what real human suffering is. And if that doesn't change your mind, then you are not a human being. Susan, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
For the
what
great
a pleasure.
work that you do.
Thank you.
And let's work together. I hope that we can do some more things, so that the ultimate goal is to eradicate poverty in this country.
Absolutely. Thank you. You're going to be one of our advocates.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.